guys, it's Quana back again with another review. And here we are at the end of the road, the series finale of This Is Us. And what I want to know from you guys is, were you satisfied with this episode? There's a lot to talk about in this episode. And a lot of emotions. Today has been an incredibly emotional and sad day with just all of the recent tragedies, and then of course the recent tragedy in Texas today. Some people were, kind of in mixed feelings of whether or not the episode should have aired tonight or not. For me, this was a nice escape from all of that. And so I want to hear your thoughts if you've had an opportunity to watch the episode, because there will be spoilers for this and literally all 6 seasons of This Is Us. So before you continue on, if you haven't watched the episode and you don't want to be spoiled, that's okay. Bookmark it and come back later. But we're going to go ahead and get into everything that happened with this episode tonight. This is Us, and the episode is Us. I probably seem way more subdued than normal. I cried a lot this episode, actually. One of the things I tweeted out as I was live tweeting during the episode was that this show, and really hats off to the writers and the actors, because this show balances tears and laughter so well. And one of the things that I really appreciate just as a review of the episode is that balance of tears and laughter, because for almost every moment that I found myself in tears, I literally was laughing seconds later. And it's very cathartic, that being able to have those moments of like crying. And they were always happy tears for the most part, but then laughing the next moment, so that wasn't sitting in that sad state for too long, or that kind of like bittersweet moment for too long. And so this show just hats off. I tip my hat to the writers of this show, because I really just love the way that this episode was written. That being said, my first critique of the night is this episode should have been 2 hours, for a lot of reasons. And for those of you who watched my theory video, kind of predicting what we're going to see from this episode, I mentioned it then. It's the series finale. There's been tons of times when there was a season premiere or a series ending, we ended up with like a 2-parter. This is the end of the show, and we're not going to get that opportunity. And so I don't understand, for such a huge hit for NBC, why this show wasn't given the space and the opportunity to be 2 hours long. Because in runtime, if you have a 2-hour-long show, you're still only going to get about a runtime of an hour and 15 minutes of actual showtime. So I don't know why that wasn't given. I think that is one of the things that I felt the most. While I thought that the ending of the show was done very well, there were definitely moments of the show where the show was speeding along. And as Jack was saying, wanting it to slow down, there were moments where it was speeding along, and I definitely felt like this is going so fast, and there's no way that they're going to be able to hit everything that most fans and viewers want to see with this episode. And I think that's probably why this episode will get a very mixed bag of feelings around whether it was successful. I don't think that this takes away from the beauty of the season. Certainly, I just think everyone pretty much agrees that the Miguel episode and then the train episode were the strongest episodes of the season. And this felt more like a regular episode. Like the whole time I was watching this episode, I was like, this doesn't even feel like a series finale. It doesn't feel like we're coming to the end of this show. It feels like many more mentioned that this episode was going to feel more like an epilogue. The thing about an epilogue is that it gives you usually everything you would want to know about the character, like down the road. Like it tells you, I go famously back to in Deathly Hallows. Spoilers for Harry Potter Deathly Hallows if you haven't seen the movie or read the books. It's been a long time since they came out, so sorry for you. But at the end, there's a 19-year time jump, and you kind of find out what's been going on with these characters 19 years into the future. And that's kind of how most epilogues work, is that you get some kind of time jump where everything is just kind of like tied up in a nice, neat little bow, and you feel like there's nothing more that you feel okay with what you're given. There's a really good epilogue at the end of the Hunger Games trilogy where you kind of find out what's going on with Katniss into the future. So that even if the book had ended where the main part of the story plot ends, you still kind of find out what's going on with her. We didn't get that, which was very shocking for a show that plays so much with time, that we did not get any flash forwards, with the brief exception of a brief flash forward of adult Jack at the beginning of the show. So let's just go ahead and go. That is kind of where I'm going to start things in terms of my review. The episode is beautiful, was beautiful. And so if this is where you have not watched it, this is where I'm going to ask you to get off the train and come back and board with us later. So the episode starts really back with Jack and Rebecca in that bed, following her journey on the train, and she's telling him about a memory of going to the park with her dad and playing on the swing set. And then we get this beautiful montage where Rebecca mentions, hey, Randall's math thing was canceled and none of the kids have anything to do, and we can just have this lazy day. It's kind of interesting because you don't know first of all, you don't know if this is a conversation that happened in real life and that we're seeing it, or if this is Rebecca in her heavenly state. And then we get this beautiful montage of Jack and Rebecca with the younger versions of the big three pushing them on the swing set. Then you get the chance to see Randall pushing Tess and Annie. You get to see Kevin with little Nikki and Franny. You get to see Kate and Toby, and then briefly Kate and Philip. And then you get to see grown-up Jack with, I believe it's his wife. It's been a long time, so correct me if I'm wrong, if that was his wife or if that was Haley. Because again, I just feel like we didn't sit with Haley long enough to really know her face. And yeah, this, again, I think that when Dan says all of our questions are answered, I mean, yeah, for the most part, the big questions are answered, but there are these things like Haley, like we're seeing grown-up Jack, but we don't see a grown-up Haley, and it's like an imbalance a little bit there. Like if you're going to show us, even if you're not going to show us all the kids in a grown-up state, you're showing us grown-up Jack, so show us his sister too. Pay that same attention to her, because so much of the show has been centered around adoption. That parallel of getting Haley involved with those moments has been completely just left out of the mix. After the montage of them on the swings, we go back to Kevin's house where Randall is working on his eulogy and struggling. I love this moment with Randall and Beth, and it's essentially really our last moment with Randall and Beth. We see them briefly, but this is it. There's a nod back to them constantly being in the kitchen playing worst case scenario to kind of deal with his anxiety, to kind of go ahead and predict what's the worst that could happen so that he can manage his anxiety. And then he says to her, no, I'm good. I've got, I'm good. Yeah, I want to get this right, but I'm okay. I don't need a worst case scenario. Showing how far he's come in the management of his anxiety. But again, it just reminded us how much we love the dynamic of Randall and Beth together. Sterling and Susan brought such wonderful life to these characters. And it was such a beautiful moment to see them playing that game of worst case scenario of like Randall buying an RV and going across the country to all the various trees where the ashes of his parents are. And then she says, oh, and we forgot about Miguel. You can go down to Puerto Rico and find out about Miguel's grandmother and all of these different things. And what a nice little road trip that might have been, you know, to get that kind of thing. I'm just saying. And so then we go from them, we see to, I believe, shortly after. And again, I'm going to do my best to kind of keep all of the timeline going because I just watched this and I was crying a whole lot with this. But we see Kate, we see the kids outside and they're playing Foursquare, and you've got the sidewalk chalk and all of those different things. And this echoes back to this memory that Rebecca's sharing with Jack of like their lazy Saturday of the kids playing Foursquare and them making the decision to do that. We see Kate and Toby. You guys, I love Chris Sullivan. Toby, I mean, he has brought such life to Toby. I can't even imagine. There's not a single person on the face of the planet, I don't think, who could have embodied Toby in the way that Chris Sullivan did. He goes on to tell Kate 3 things that are kind of outrageous that an ex-husband shouldn't be telling his wife and his ex-wife. And the first is that her mother was proud of her. The second is that he's proud of her. And the third is that he loves her. Now, of course, I think that we understand this to mean like at this moment, like he still loves her. Like she's always going to be someone he chooses to love, to care about. She's probably likely his best friend in many aspects. But it is interesting because here we are back with Kate and Toby who have all of this chemistry between them, and their marriage didn't work. And I guess that is a truth that people experience, but we didn't see any of Kate and Philip in these last 4 episodes, it feels like, really, since the wedding. So we've never gotten that from them. And then we briefly see Kevin and Sophie, and then we go back to the past with this lazy Saturday where they're deciding what they're going to do. We find out, we see Randall getting upset about them calling it like a math competition and him explaining what mathlete is and no one understanding him. And just all of the things. I think it's really remarkable. So Sterling K. Brown, who plays Randall, tweeted out that most of the episode, which I'm assuming is like the flashback sequences, was filmed 3 years ago. 3 years ago, guys. So, because the kids don't look anything like that. Like Parker, Mackenzie, they don't look anything at all like that anymore. They're all like 15, 16, 17 years old. Like it's stupid how tall and adult-like they look. So it was amazing because then here we get to see that there was a great deal of forethought. Like this moment was always going to be centered around this lazy Saturday and these memories of that. Even if the show itself perhaps might have been a little bit longer, it was always going to end this way. For those of you, sorry about that, who were fans of Parenthood and loved the Braverman family, there are some parallels between the way that show ended and the way that this show is ending in terms of like it being centered around like family time together in this game. Although I wish that This Is Us had leaned into that a little bit more. It still kind of echoes that a little bit. Throughout the episode, we're in that flashback and we're dealing with the kids really, especially Randall and Kevin, not wanting to participate in this lazy Saturday. Kevin is too busy worried about the fact that he can't do pull-ups and he didn't have as impressive of a showing in the presidential fitness test as he would have wanted. Guys, talk about a throwback to the 90s. I remember that presidential fitness test. I remember not being able to do a pull-up. I think I could do like 5 at the time. Like that was max it. But you wanted to get something, like you just wanted to get like a certificate of completion or something. And that was just such a throwback moment. So I definitely could relate to Kevin like wanting to be impressive. Rebecca, I thought it was really interesting that we see Rebecca go in and try to reaffirm Kevin, and then Jack going and reaffirming Randall, because so many moments throughout the show have been centered around Rebecca and Randall's relationship, and Jack and Kate's relationship, with Kevin kind of being the middleman. Rebecca knows exactly what to say to Kevin, though, and cheers him up and tells him that it doesn't really matter, that one day he is going to be athletic and tall, and he's going to do great things, and future casting, because she can see what her children are going to be. And he became all of those things. Now, we kind of get a moment where we see grown-up Kevin, and it seems like he's remembering those words from her. So these flashbacks are happening kind of within the mind of Rebecca, but also within the mind of each of the family members, tying them together. Eventually we get to Jack, who is talking to Randall about the fact that, what is going on with him. He's not being like himself. And he's like, oh, some guy's been giving me a hard time because I've got some peach fuzz. That boy didn't have not a lick of peach fuzz that we could see on his skin. But he got into it with this boy at Mathletes and got suspended from Mathletes for a week and detention. And so Jack proceeds to teach the boys how to shave. Sorry, frog in my throat. I thought it was funny because Sterling K. Brown tweeted out about Jack started him off, but didn't know a lick about teaching black boys and razor bumps. And I just thought that was the most hilarious thing. But, again, this is a memory that they have of Jack and the boys specifically. He briefly goes out and talks to Kate, and we kind of see Kate taking on this role of like observer, which I mentioned a couple of videos back that like that's been the role that Kate's kind of been playing. And maybe it wasn't as developed before, but it's really obvious that they are centering this idea of her being the one who sees things. I always tell you, every show has to have characters that it's just their job to see insights so that they can reflect what we, the viewers, are thinking. Beth's been largely that for the This Is Us show, where she's been reflecting what viewers are thinking. But Kate is more of a quieter version where she can see that those things that we're thinking and reflect that back to her brothers. So I thought that was really, really sweet. And we eventually get a flashback to Jack and Rebecca taking the triplets to the store, where they first see that Pin the Tail on the Donkey game that has this picture of a little black boy, a little white boy, and a little white girl. And it's like kismet. It's like this is meant to be, that this reflects our family. And so we have to get this. And this is why this particular game becomes so important to their family. Also, during this lazy Saturday, they watch home movies. And we get to see the home movie where they first utter the big three, the very first big three chant. And that was a waterwork moment for me, guys. I was like, oh, who is leaking water through the ceiling? What is happening here? I felt like, if you guys have seen the episode of Grey's Anatomy starring Mandy Moore, with Mandy Moore guest starring on that episode. You guys who know the episode know what I'm talking about. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it's a pretty big episode. All right, sorry guys, I had to adjust for battery loss so I wouldn't lose battery there. But I felt like, oh my gosh, what is the ceiling leaking? And it was like, no, you're crying. I was like, that was me this episode and with that moment. We get, interestingly enough, and this is where it begins to kind of fall apart for me with regards to the story length, is a montage of the eulogies. It all kind of passes in a blur. Again, give it up to the writers and to the crew, because they weave that into the storyline later. But yeah, I think fans are going to wish that we had heard. I think even what I might have liked to have seen is to have heard a little bit. We heard a snippet, like 3 seconds of Kate singing. We saw like Kevin laugh and say something. I would have liked to have heard Kevin's speech a little bit. Even if they were going to blur out Randall's speech because of the plot point of it later, I would have liked to have heard that. I think that would have worked well. Like, we're getting Kate and Kevin's, especially since they didn't get a chance to speak much last episode. And then we don't get Randall because he's the one who's known for words, but we don't actually get those words from him. That would have been really, really nice. Eventually he's kind of just left there in the church and kind of continue with his thoughts. And I don't know if it's around this part because the timeline kind of blurs for me. I feel like I'm dealing with like multiverse of madness here. But at some point, there is a recollection around the idea of being grandparents. And I think this is where he's talking to Beth, I believe, at this point. Again, okay, I was crying a lot tonight, so forgive me. But he has a flashback to William going into the room, putting his hand on Annie and Tess's head, saying goodbye to them. This is before the Memphis road trip, and kind of continuing with the word grandfather and all of the gravity and the weight that that means. This idea that you love someone unconditionally who, depending on how long you're with them, may not have many tangible memories of you. And this is where we see Randall dealing with this as well. This idea that this has all gone so fast and he can't even remember what he said, and how he's been so worried about losing his mother, and now it's all kind of going by in a blur and he can't remember all of it. Again, with the waterworks, like, I don't even remember if they actually showed that moment when they filmed the Memphis episode. I don't think they did. So the idea that they were so thoughtfully creating these episodes, and that was, to me, unless they had some great CGI work, that was clearly filmed years ago when Randall was clean shaven and everything. So that, and then the girls were young then, so it was clearly filmed in season 1. So the idea that they had that much forethought into it, again, I love that chef's kiss, beautiful moment. Eventually the girls go and show up at the cabin to cheer up their dad. We've gotten so much with Deja and Randall, and I think there is a camaraderie between the two of them as being adoptees. But and we briefly hear Tess's voice, just briefly hear Annie's voice. Again, I just wish that we had gotten more time. I just feel like these last few episodes have been so rushed, especially with these older actors playing these characters, that we didn't get a chance to really get to see them. Really, Deja is the only one who've gotten to see, to like kind of embody that role. And I will say, okay, to be fair, the actress who plays older Tess, we got a chance to see her back when they were first kind of unveiling that plot point. But I wish that we had gotten a chance to hear them now in this moment. But again, the actress who's playing adult Deja, spot on for the voice and everything, right? I mean, you guys, I mean, it's just like, I really had to stop and think for a second if it was a voiceover work, because it just was so spot on for Deja's voice, like seriously, and mannerisms and everything. It's just like, it's uncanny. Like, I don't know if they're related in real life, but if they're not, I would definitely be wanting a DNA test, like seriously. And so she talks to Randall and cheers him up by reminding him that he's going to be a grandfather. And then she reveals a new secret, that they found out the sex, and it is a boy, and they want to name him William, because even though she's never met William, she knows William, and he's her grandfather too. Guys, when I tell you, my face still probably has streaks on it because I was crying so much in that moment. Again, the balance, because when Randall jumps up and starts to like hoop and holler and is so excited about like finally having a boy, being surrounded by all these beautiful black women, but he finally gets a boy, I was cracking up laughing. I thought that was just so beautiful. Um, I love that. I loved that moment, and I will never get enough of Randall and his family, Beth and the girls. Like, I just think that those actors and those storylines have been so beautiful. But in all fairness, we didn't get a single moment with Kevin and Sophie, really. Like, brief glimpses of them, but no actual dialogue with them. And that is extremely unfortunate. Like, extremely unfortunate and unbalanced. Now, yes, are we aware that, like, Sterling is the most celebrated actor probably of the cast in terms of accolades? Yes. Sterling, Milo, and Mandy, without a doubt, hands down, right? But I do feel like, in fairness to Justin and to Chrissy, like, it's been centered around them as a core family, and so I would have liked to have seen a more of a balanced approach to telling these last storylines. We get back to the family in the flashback, and they're playing the pin the tail of the donkey game. And I definitely think one of, if not one of the top 5 quotes of the night comes from a young Kate, who wins the pin on the tail of the donkey game. And when asked if she's cheating, she says, well, I look at where you guys were before the game started, and you guys never shut up. And so as long as I know where you are, I know how to win. Like, as long as I know where you guys are, I know where I'm going. Like, how beautiful is that? As long as you know where your family is, you know where you're going. Like, that's just such a beautiful moment. Such beautiful words. And then essentially we go back to the house, Kevin's house, and we see the family playing pin the tail on the donkey. I did miss Mun's segment. We did get a beautiful Nikki moment earlier in the show where Nikki, basically chastises Kevin for coming into his life. You came into my life. You made me have, like, when you don't have anyone, you don't have anything to lose, you don't have anything to care about, so you're not going to be sad. But basically, I'm summing this up because I can't say it as good as Nikki did. But now he's come into his life, and here he is at the funeral of his brother's wife, and he's sad and emotional and caring about all and having all this family, and it's Kevin's fault. But he means it in, like, the sweetest way, that, like, he finally has family to care about, right? And he basically, goes off on Kevin. I love the dynamic between Nikki and Kevin. It's always been great, and that was really a sweet moment. There were just sweet moments abounding, and so we get this montage of them playing the pin to tail in the donkey game. We see Randall looking over at Deja with her hand on her stomach. We see Kevin looking out at the family, looking out at his kids, putting his head on little Nikki's head. We see Kate kind of smiling at her family. We get one last moment before the montage happens, actually, with Randall, Kevin, and Kate on the steps. And this is where I guess we do get our epilogue, right? This is where we get our future casting answers, because we find out that the Oreo cookies, deep fried Oreo thing that Rebecca talks about earlier in the episode is because the DNC wants him to go to Ohio. And guys, if you don't follow politics, you don't know that Ohio is where you go. It's state number 1 battleground state that you go to when you are going to run for president. And so Randall is running for president. Like, that's basically if they like him, he'll be running. And remember back, I mentioned that he says to Rebecca, if I do this, if I run for senator, I'm going to win, and I'm going to keep going all the way. And she basically tells him that she knows. Kate is going to continue to open up music schools for visually impaired students and make the world jealous of all of these musically talented, visually impaired young people. And Kevin is going to put all of his work and efforts into the nonprofit. I do wish that we had kind of gotten back to his acting a little bit, but I get it in terms of his arc and his growth. Like, he no longer needs the applause of the audience in order to find his self-worth and self-fulfillment. So much of him being an actor was needing those accolades, needing that attention to fulfill himself, and he no longer needs that. And for that, I love that part of the storyline for him. And so They go back in, and essentially the show ends with Jack and Rebecca back in that bed, talking about the idea of moving on, talking about the idea of, you know, how sad it is to leave, wanting to be there, wanting more time with them. All of this kind of stems from Randall talking about how Rebecca squeezed his hand really, really hard at the end. And what was that about? And so we see Jack and Rebecca lying in bed, and they're talking, and she's finally okay. She's finally ready to let go. And so she squeezed his hand really, really hard in the bed, and then she lets go. Ooh, I am not going to cry. I was like, oh my gosh, they are trying to catch me right in the ticker right here. And so then that's when we get to like basically the end of the show. Right before the end of the show, there's like a look that Jack shares with like Randall shares with Deja, like that kind of thing. The show kind of ends on like them. It still didn't feel like a series finale to me at the end of it all. And I don't say that just as like a super fan who didn't want the show to end. It just, everything from like a title card at the end, the screen fading black, a shot or a montage of images from the series, anything like that that would have just kind of, I think, put like a final stamp on it all would have been really, really nice. And probably how I would have done. If you guys remember, the show began with this premise of like how there's 8 billion people in the world with the same, or not 8 billion people, but like 8 million people in the world with the same exact birthday, right? And this was going to be the story of 4 people who had the exact same birthday. Jack, Kevin, Kate, and Randall, who were all turning 36. And eventually it's unveiled that the secret was that they were related, like that Kate, Kevin, and Randall were triplets and siblings, and that Jack was their dad, and they shared his birthday. At the end of it all, if we had gotten a montage or something of like all of the cast members of everyone who would have been involved in the show, I think even that would have put a pin in the idea that like this was the finale, this was the end. It just, the way that it ended, because the episode felt like such a regular episode, like any old regular episode that we would have of This Is Us, that last week's episode felt more like a series finale. And I guess maybe that's what Mandy Moore means when she says that this feels like an epilogue, that this is kind of like a bonus episode, right? That this feels kind of like a bonus episode that was supposed to air or didn't air or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I can't be mad at this episode. I think the episode was gorgeous. I cried 5 times in the episode. So obviously, like, I was emotional, and the writing was beautiful, and everyone did their job. I just feel slightly underwhelmed, but it's definitely like not on par with like How I Met Your Mother or Game of Thrones in terms of like show endings. Like, this is definitely better than all of those, hands down. So yeah, though I know this is kind of lengthy, but guys, this is it for us, and I'm not wanting this to end either. But what I do want to know is what you guys think. So let me know down in the comments. What did you guys think of the episode? Did you like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were there things that you wish we had seen? I'm not going to drag the show, guys. I'm not going to do that. I do wish the episode had been 2 hours long, and that's really the only complaint that I can actually have, is that if they had been longer, I think we would have got more of those things. But with the hour that they had, I thought that it was beautiful. And so that's my review of This Is Us, the series finale. I want to just thank you guys again for being on this journey with me, for watching with me and talking with me about the show, because, you know, I think we're all part of this community of like sometimes you don't have people in your life to talk about your shows with. If you are on Twitter, Dan Fogelman penned a beautiful letter to the fans. And in this, he talked about like having that show that you call my show. And this is our show, right? This show is our show. So you guys have been here talking with me about this show for the last 3 years that I've been on YouTube, so I really appreciate it. If you guys have not subscribed already, do so. This community of us watching shows together, having people to join with and talk to, it doesn't have to end with This Is Us. These actors that we adore and love will be in other projects. Hopefully Dan Fogelman will write another hit show and we can link back up and talk about those things. But there are a lot of shows that are coming out now that hopefully I'll be reviewing something that you currently will be planning to watch. Stranger Things season 4 is dropping this weekend. I'll be watching that. I am planning to review The Wilds. Seasons 1 and 2 are already out. I've already watched them, but I'm planning to do a formal review of them. I'll go ahead and put a plug in and say I highly recommend. Really good show to watch. I will be reviewing The Handmaid's Tale, as always, once it drops. We don't have a release date for that, but I'm going to just throw a shot at the dart and say perhaps November. And I'm willing, and Heartstopper, I haven't forgotten, I'm going to be dropping a Heartstopper review video. And if there is something that you would like for me to review and that's for us to talk about over on the channel, then drop down below in the comments and let me know what it is, and I'll try to get to it. I'm thankfully going to have the summer off, and so I will hopefully be coming with more and more content for you guys. But this has been a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you guys down below in the comments, and until next time, toodles.